Welcome to the Fascist Round Table. My name is Joshua Neuer. I am the chairman of the American Blackshirt Party, and I will also be your host today. And on this show, what we're going to do is talk about current events, history, philosophy, all from a fascist perspective, from a fascist philosophical standpoint, discussing fascist ideas. And joining me today, we have James Ellis. We have John Maniglia, our Midwest area director. We have Kenny down in Florida. Scenes making this all possible. We have Jesse Drummond. Now, we got a few topics that we want to talk about today. First of all, I want to lead off with, it was an ideology that flourished during the interwar era. And I want to talk about how it's relevant today. Is it relevant today? We think it is, and we actually think it's more relevant today than it was during the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. And I'm going to try to tell you why. Now, liberal democracy, which is the ideology and the state that we live under, will try to tell you that fascism is an older ideology. It doesn't have a place in the modern world. It's contrary to progress and evolution. Because they view liberal democracy views society as starting at a point back in time, and it views history as an evolution of one event leading up to another, with liberal democracy being the logical outcome of that. So all the ideologies which came previously, they're trying to argue is obsolete and doesn't apply anymore. If that is the case, if that's true, then we're all in very serious trouble. Because let's talk about a few things that's wrong with liberal democracy. First of all, if we're looking at employment, today an effective unemployment rate of about 21%. Now, that's not using the current numbers that you get from Washington. This is how they calculated it back in the 1930s during the Great Depression. So our unemployment rate is almost equal to that 1930s. The only reason why we don't see this on an everyday basis is because the social safety net we have today is much more effective than what it was back then. We also have a situation where people are not making ends meet. We've had, for the last 40 to 50 years, we've had actual effective wages go down in this country. So you have a lot more people living paycheck to paycheck. You have women who aren't given the choice of whether to stay at home and be mothers. They have to work because the incomes people are making aren't succeeding. We have the highest prison population in the world in this country. We have an epidemic of drug abuse and suicides. And so things aren't working, but liberal democracy and its proponents, I don't think they necessarily have evil intentions. I don't think they're bad, but the problem is that they shut off debate. They've been bred and they've been programmed to believe a certain way, that even though they think democracy is bad and it doesn't work, the argument is there is no better system of government. So what are you going to do? And that's a terrible way to think, because what it does is it takes these conditions and it conditions people to accept them, not to think of alternatives, not to offer something different. And this is where fascism comes in. Fascism says that you don't have to have high unemployment. You don't have to have epidemics of crime. People should have a living wage. And it gives you the ability to do that. During the 1920s and 30s, Mussolini effectively disabled the mafia in Sicily. It made it a non-entity. During the Great Depression, the highest unemployment rate in Italy was no more than 6%. So, and it does this by giving the state the power and the rationale and the tools to make itself effective, because it has the state, the family, the nation as the center of society. Democracy, classical liberalism, doesn't abide by this. It thinks of the state and the nation as something artificial. Fascism is the direct opposite of that. And so we don't have to live under these conditions. We don't have to tolerate this. And this is what fascism does. It empowers individuals, it empowers families, it empowers the state to deal with a lot of these problems that right now the government just ignores and says, well, we have to put up with. Think about this question. To you, is fascism appropriate for modern day America? Does it work for you?
Oh, definitely. And I think that you touched on points that I would have touched on myself. you see here, obviously, communism is a ideology that's kind of decayed because most of its principles are pretty much defunct when you consider they've been debunked, economically, things like this, but they're still persistent because they're a track ideology. But you see in our society, pretty much the problems of capitalism arising. You said there's also unhappiness on people's jobs and wages. People can't aspire to be what they want to be. They don't reach the quality of life that everybody else is seeking. And pretty much the idea of the American dream is starting to dissipate, mainly because of the flaws of capitalism, where you have materialism kind of driving, but you have a system where corruption pretty much takes hold and people can't actually move forward. So I think fascism is because it appeases those kind of conflicts that come between management and workers, and it allows for a system that allows the worker to move forward, them to make a more livable wage, and obviously alleviate some of these problems that arise in a capitalist society.
Yeah, corporatism, the economic system of fascism, deals with a lot of these issues, and a lot of everything else emanates from that. I agree completely. John, what do you think about this?
I think that outside of the obvious benefits that fascism can bring in an economic sense, I think that what it also brings is a very strong social groundwork for a culture, for a country, for a state. What you look at today is this it's like a compass that's broken. No one has a single sense of direction in which they want to strive for, go. If you looked at the study of deviancy in this country, starting from the 60s and upwards, you'll notice that deviancy is stemmed from its neighborhoods and or is taught from its parents. That's actually one of the theories as to why somebody would act out. Is it something homegrown or is it something learned? Is it something that's part of your environment or is it taught to you? Now, either way, whether this is part of your environment or taught to you, fascism instills this pride of nation. This instills this pride of work. It instills this drive that allows the individual to work for something better than himself. What we have today is this sense of selfishness, a very selfish behavior with the individual. I want a better car. I want this. I want that. And it translates into bigger and more harmful things. So if the individual at the lowest level is constantly thinking, I want a better car, for example, then the individual at the higher level goes, I want a better yacht. And then that's going to translate on the economic level. When you have a problem with your social standings in your culture in a country, it's a snowball effect. So again, the individual wants the better car. It translates to his CEO going, I want a better yacht, which then has the CEO jacking up prices, lowering wages, and causing, again, a massive snowball effect, which then it gets even bigger. It gets even bigger because now you're not only affecting the jobs, the family, and the individual. Well, now it's no longer enough because now the jobs affect the government. And the government now has to react towards the greed of the individual instead of the needs of the community, the needs of the nation. And I think that fascism really puts that forward, really takes that first step and drives home the necessity that is needed to make for a better community.
Well put, John. Kenny, what's your answer to this question?
I absolutely think that the interwar fascism directly relates to where we're at now and is incredibly necessary for where we're at now. Like everybody has said before me, I mean, we could see it all. We've seen the massive suicide rates, the drug epidemic that's plaguing most of the Midwest. Even in my state of Florida, we have a massive problem with prescription drugs here in our nation, in our state. And it's getting worse. And as you said before in an interview, and I totally agree, Mussolini was a man before his time. And I absolutely agree with that. He and the fascism of the interwar predicted where we were going to be at. It knew the effects it would have on us. And you see that nowhere better than in the United States. Hedonism has taken a massive upturn in our nation. I mean, people couldn't care less about their neighbors. They couldn't care less about the future of the nation as a whole. It becomes about themselves. And that's what happens when you have a society that is hyper individualized. There's a problem when people no longer care about their neighbor, their nation, or the future thereof. And that's what this has done to us. And fascism answers that by not only putting pride of nation, putting the pride of the family back to our people. It not only exemplifies, it increases these things in people. It amplifies it. And you see a vivid new people in a sense. You see the new people that come from so much pride that fascism puts back into them. I mean, right now, some of the gracious numbers are 60 to 70% of people have no emotional connection to their work at all. They couldn't care less. The top 3 leading causes of death amongst youth is homicide, suicide, and accidents. It shows a total lack of concern, a total lack of caring. And fascism puts that back into the people, amplifies it, and you see a new vibrant people out of it. So it is absolutely necessary. And I believe, as I said before, that these were men before their time, and they saw where we were going, and now we're on the path of fixing that and giving back the future of our people through fascism.
I think that's spot on. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
When we say nation, we truly do mean nation here too. Nation as Americans. You know, the American nation needs to have pride in America, and that includes absolutely everybody that is American citizen. You know, and I think that's something that we should highlight here is that, you know, nationalism does not racism. Nationalism equals pride of nation. And depending on your nation, that's your pride. Our pride is an American nation that includes every American.
Well said, John. Well said. Excellent. We have a couple of late additions here. Matthew Hines, our Deep South Regional Director, is just joining us. And Matt, let's talk about the interwar fascism. Mussolini, Mosley, Primo Rivera. Is this fascism of the interwar era relevant today?
Absolutely. I think that the fascism that was on display then is an excellent model for what we should be utilizing right now, because there's a very common trend amongst many Americans that would suggest, you know, let's just try to improve the system that we have. Let's do this to improve the system we have. Let's do that to improve the system that we have. And I think that when you take a step back and try to take a larger picture of the United States, going back to the founding of this nation, I think you realize that simple reform isn't going to bring about the solutions that we need to try to bring unity to our society. Because if you look, I think you can see it most clearly that it was in the design by our founding fathers that brought about these inherent design flaws. And perhaps they weren't necessarily flaws at the time, and they had no way of knowing that they would become such issues. They were, of course, they were men of their times, so they were limited in the knowledge that they possessed, only knowing, you know, up until then what they could possibly know. They couldn't look into the future and see what issues would spring up. But I think that a lot of the issues that we face as a society today are a result of those inherent design flaws that have been in place. So I think that we're going to have a more drastic approach to resolving national issues. You could say even revolutionary, nonviolent revolution, of course, but revolutionary nonetheless. And I think, as I've said, I think that those men during the interwar period were an excellent example that we could use in bringing about the solutions that we need to get this country back in a forward and progressive direction, a positively progressive direction, not a necessarily negative progressive direction. And I think I may have said it before on a previous podcast. I don't recall, but just so that people can hear it now, I think the simplest way that we can understand in terms of issues that we're facing, a material solution, the capitalist by the capitalist model, a material solution cannot bring about a philosophical, moral, spiritual resolution to issues. It just simply it can't work. You cannot use the almighty dollar to resolve the spiritual needs of our society. You can't use the almighty dollar to bring a spirit of national unity to the people of this nation. People want to try to articulate the power of markets and how effective they are at bringing national cohesion. And that's true. There's no doubt that a strong economic model is going to be necessary for bringing the people of this nation together. But the dollar bill alone cannot solve all of our problems. The dollar bill alone cannot inspire people to a higher sense of purpose. So those men in the interwar period, the Mussolinis, the Mosleys, they understood that, and they believed in a higher purpose, a greater national purpose, national vision. And I think that's why it's so imperative that we as fascists today should impart that message upon the American people, and why the American people need to look to that and think to themselves, okay, you know what? It's time that we start, looking beyond ourselves, and let's look to what can we ensure a better quality of life for not only ourselves but for future generations to come.
Fascism is the negation of materialism, and that's such a beneficial. It's one of the beneficial aspects of fascism, and it's really one of the foundations of our belief system. So before we go on to our next topic, does anybody else have anything else to say on this?
Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Anthony here. Just kind of hopping in on you. I know I've been out and about for a while, but I'm always going to be coming back. So let me just give you an opinion on kind of my thoughts about the interwar fascism and how it will be relevant today. So if you think about that period in time, there were a couple major ideologies popping up and kind of taking power in certain areas of the world, and they all came to clash in Britain, or not Britain, Europe, I apologize. To me, it's that period of time kind of determined what's going to happen in the future in the rest of the 20th century and so on onto the 21st, which we are still pretty much feeling the repercussions or the consequences of that war in the government system that we're living in now. So let's take fascist Italy, for example. They were kind of trying new things here and trying to figure out what works, and they knew that the system they had, liberal democracy, was not, and monarchy and all that stuff like that, they were not going in the right direction economically and socially for the people. They kind of foreseen what was going to happen with that. And then you also had the communists. They had their own ideas, and they were kind of shooting for the same type of goal, although it was not in the same direction. So you have the fascists here. They were trying new forms of government and new economic plans and such things. And that's really revolutionary to me. It really inspires me to want to make a change and make things happen and kind of always fight for the cause of making something new going on. Because from what we've seen so far, all the system leads to is decline. You have the major power gaining that power, and then suddenly they just naturally decline. Everything degrades. There's nothing new going on. You don't see any revolutionary economic plans coming up from any of these presidents that we've been electing into office for the past who knows how many years, since before World War II, at least here in America. They don't have any ways to change or answer to the problems that the citizens are bringing up. Nothing's happening. We say, we want this, we want that. They give it to us or they don't, and nothing changed. No one is thinking deeper into it and trying to solve the problem through the system as opposed to just throwing another policy at it, when that might not be the root of the problem itself. It's probably a lot deeper than that. And that's kind of what inspires me and why I think their mission is relevant to our mission, because we have to fight and make changes and come up with these ideas that nobody has ever really implemented and tested, at least through the test of time, which is going to be the real answer. So really, when you're coming up with these new revolutionary ideas, changing the way the system is going, you probably have a lot better chance than something that's already been shown to just slowly decline the entire country or the entire Western world in our case. That's about it on that subject. Thank you.
Let's move on to our next topic. We're going to talk about visa worker programs. It was reported earlier this week that the H-1B worker program, which brings people from overseas to work here in the United States, was at an all-time low at 62,000 individuals. And this is, the fact that it's decreasing is a good thing. But here's the problem. 62,000 people brought over here to work on the H-1B visa program is 62,000 too many. And the 62,000 number doesn't account for all the other visa programs, which brings foreign workers here to the United States. So I guarantee you this figure goes up into the six figures. And this is something that's toxic. The idea behind this is that there are certain industries that Americans are not willing to work in, or there's not enough Americans that are qualified to do this. And this idea is absolute bunk. I want to read to you a quote from Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa. The program was intended to serve employers who cannot find the skilled workers they need in the United States. Most people believe that employers are supposed to recruit Americans before they petition for an H-1B worker. Yet, under the law, most employers are not required to prove to the Department of Labor that they tried to find an American to fill the job first. And if there is an equally or even better qualified U.S. worker available, the company does not have to offer him or her the job. Over the years, the program has become a government-assisted way for employers to bring in cheaper foreign labor, and now it appears these foreign workers take over rather than complement the U.S. workforce. And so this whole system is based upon a lie. It's corporate welfare. It's a way to line the pocketbooks of business owners at the expense of the American worker. And one case stands out in my head. A few years ago, Southern California Edison, which is based in Los Angeles, of workers, and part of the condition of getting their severance pay was that they had to train their replacements who were brought in from overseas on the visa program. And the fact that something like this was tolerated is absolutely... Now, the most prominent program, the most prominent industry where foreign workers are brought in is the tech industry. Now, 50% of American graduates who get a degree in the STEM field, which is for the technological industry, 50% of those, only 50% find a job in that industry. For 10 years, only 8% of them still have that job. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no worker deficit. There is no need for an H-1B visa program. It's corporate welfare, pure and simple. It's the idea of taking somebody, and this is connected to immigration too. It's the idea that you can take somebody from overseas, take them away from their history, their family, traditions, put them here in the United States, and there's not going to be any problem. The outcome of liberal democracy. This is the outcome of capitalism. This is how it thinks of people. It thinks of you as a piece